Tech Trends 24/7 Leaders is a passionate podcast hosted by James P. Quinn on technology innovation. It provides insightful interviews with key and inspiring innovators in areas of corporate technology, office of the future, AI, real estate, sustainability, assistive technologies, and other emerging technologies. Tech Trends 24/7 Leaders will smartly position you where your business, life, and industries are moving for the future.
On today's episode, we are excited to have Mike Hochanadel on the podcast. Mike is a driving force in data center capital markets and is the managing director and head of all digital assets at Harrison Street. He brings 21 years of industry experience and is responsible for leading Harrison Street's digital business and defining strategy for their digital sector. Prior to Harrison Street, Mike was with JLL for 15 years where he focused on the data center asset class. Welcome, Mike.
Talking about markets, with the work that we're doing is that we're really constantly looking for emerging markets. Where's really the next frontier going to be? And just like to get your thoughts on emerging markets and what are you seeing from your window pane?
Yeah. I 100% agree with that, by the way. As we think about our kind of investment strategy and site selection parameters, it's really three buckets. It's creating actionable sites in core markets, which if you can do is great. Obviously, it's increasingly hard to do, as you know. But I think you've spent some time on some of that in the northern New Jersey market for sure. So that's one. I think the second is like the path of growth out of those primary markets. And so those are locations where we see a large established market expanding into surrounding regions. There are quite a few areas in Northern Virginia we see that. And then the third category is, as you point out, is like the newly emerging cluster markets that are growing out of secondary markets or just are, for a variety of reasons, emerging de facto, greenfield. And we made the investment successfully in New Albany with Lincoln. That market turned into a primary market seemingly overnight, right? It was very much a secondary market. There were a couple of hyperscale deployments there. And then fast forward 12 to 18 months, and everybody's there, both operators and hyperscalers and multiple availability zones, new network providers, to the point that it quickly became a constrained market. Yeah, that's one of the interesting nuances when you look at some of these secondary markets is the utility providers are operating off of a smaller base, and you get 10, a dozen, 20 campuses, each at 300 megawatts. And then they're all of a sudden, hey, that's more than we have in the entire system. So I think you'll see more of them emerge, probably none getting to the level of significance of Northern Virginia or even Dallas and Chicago and Atlanta. But the other ones that we pay attention to, I mean, we've looked at Charlotte. You've seen some big commitments to Charlotte. I think that's one where the demand is clearly going there. I think Duke makes it a little bit tricky in terms of how you engage with them for power, but clearly that's emerging as one. Louisville is a market that we've heard about in that regard. Nashville, Memphis, and just some of those other markets in that mid-Atlantic region. Obviously, all the markets across the I-80 corridor, many of which have already become, fairly notable destinations. But on the western end of that, starting to see some pickup in Cheyenne. We've got some things in Cheyenne, and we're seeing that market grow substantially. And then historically, Denver has always been more of a connectivity market. You're now starting to see some people think about that market a little bit differently. We actually have a large site in Denver that we're working through the power procurement process on. Salt Lake City obviously has already become a very significant destination market in the West. We're very bullish on Reno. We have our site in Reno. I think that's a market where it's emerging as just a much easier place to do business and still cater to a lot of the workloads that generally reside in the Bay Area. I would say similar to the relationship between kind of Phoenix and Southern California. And then one of the markets that I've been paying attention to, which is interesting, if you just look at a map and look at clustered activity around markets based on power availability, population density, and network.
Mhm.
The one that you don't see any is St. Louis. And that makes no sense to me. And there are some things that we're looking at in St. Louis. I think in 25, you'll start to see that market activated, particularly on the kind of western side within that corridor that runs to Kansas City. But at the end of the day, the ingredients that we're looking for are, access to power, a large enough contiguous land site that you can probably plan 3 buildings with some level of expansion over time. Obviously, network, water, and proximity to it, a reasonable population center. So anyway, and those are the markets. And then we're not super active in this space, but you are starting to hear about these more remote locations where operators, developers, users to some extent are just going to where power is.
Power is right, exactly.
That's like the Dakotas
Yes.
or West Texas. But again, I think those are a little bit trickier from a real estate investment standpoint.
Agreed. No, that's a great snapshot on emerging markets, Mike. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Tech Trends 24/7 Leaders. To learn more about technology trends, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can also read my book, Tech Trends 24/7 and the Impact of COVID-19, which is rated a must-read book by CIO Insight. The book is available for purchase on Amazon or on our website, Tech Trends 24/7. When conducting research for the book, I was inspired to see how technology innovation was making a positive difference in people's lives. As a result, in 2020, I founded Beacon of Hope 365. Our mission is to leverage technology to help people in need. More information on the charity can be found on beaconofhope365.org. Thanks again for tuning into this episode, and a big thank you to my entire podcast team, Peyton Pellington, Sal Fortuna, and Carmela Petrone. See you on the next episode.